I want to make sure I take advantage of all the time we have this morning. Couple opening remarks from me before we kick into our Q&A with Senator Jesse Arreguín. Welcome to the East Bay Leadership Council's Capital Series. And thank you for joining us for what promises to be a compelling conversation with Senator Jesse Arreguín. I'm Mark Orcutt, President and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council, a nonprofit organization dedicated to strengthening the economy and improving quality of life in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. For nearly 90 years, we've worked to build a policy environment where businesses can start, stay, grow, and where residents can thrive. Events like today remind us why we do this work. We believe in the power of dialogue, collaboration, and informed civic engagement. The Capital Series brings those values to life by convening leaders who shape the decisions impacting our communities every day. Before we go further, I'd like to offer a sincere thank you to our series sponsors. Your support makes our work possible and allows us to host events like this with intention and impact. Our Capital Series sponsors include the Martinez Refining Company, IBEW Local 302, Western States Petroleum Association, the Contra Costa Community College District, the Contra Costa Water District, the Hospital Council of Northern and Central California, H-Cycle, and John Muir Health. Thank you to all of our Capital Series sponsors. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize EBLC's leading members, organizations that invest at a higher level to support our mission-driven work year-round. You'll see their logos on the screen, and I want to thank them for their continued partnership and support. I also want to make sure you all have October 9th on your calendar for the conclusion of the 2025 Capital Series as we sit down with Jesse's colleague, Senator McNerney. We'll be sitting down in Pleasanton, and if you don't know Senator McNerney, he is now serving in the California State Senate after 16 years in Congress. He represents the Tri-Valley and the San Joaquin County and chairs the Revenue and Taxation Committee. His leadership has been central to advancing projects like Valley Link that strengthen economic and transportation ties across the region. He's a critical leader on so many issues for our region's future, and I hope you join us. There's a QR code on the screen. There'll be a link in a chat later on. I hope to see you in Pleasanton. Now, before I introduce the senator, one more thing. We have brought back the Capital Series bingo card by popular demand. So scan the QR code on the screen to generate your bingo card. It's filled with themes and phrases you might hear during today's conversation. If you get a bingo, take a screenshot, email it to our team. I think it will be exceedingly easy to get a bingo. If you get it, you'll be entered into a raffle for a comped ticket to an upcoming EBLC event. I wish you all the best of luck in that endeavor. Okay, so now to jump into our conversation, it is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker this afternoon. Senator Jesse Arreguín was elected in 2024 to represent California's 7th Senate District, a district that spans the communities of Oakland to the south to Rodeo in the north, bringing over 16 years of public service and a focus on economic resilience, housing, and infrastructure. Previously, the first Latino and youngest mayor in Berkeley in over a century. I hope I'm getting this right, Senator. He championed affordable housing, downtown revitalization, and strong public-private partnerships. Even as a freshman senator, he's already taken on major leadership roles in the legislature, serving as chair of the Public Safety and Human Services Committee, among others, where he is guiding legislation on penal code, social services, homelessness, and welfare with conviction. He's also prioritizing solutions to housing affordability, workforce development, and transportation investment. So with that introduction, please join me in welcoming Senator Arreguín. Senator, let me give you a few minutes. Just the floor is yours before we jump into a Q&A. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to the East Bay Leadership Council for inviting me, and really look forward to the discussion today. I'm honored to represent West Contra Costa County in the California State Senate, and as you said, my district goes from the Carquinez Bridge all the way down the San Francisco Bay to the city of Oakland. And so West Contra Costa County is a really important part of my district. And I'm proud that we have hit the ground running in staying connected to leaders, business leaders, community leaders in West Contra Costa County, and recently opened a district office at Richmond City Hall to serve my West Contra Costa County constituents. A promise I made to my constituents when I ran for the Senate to make sure that we can provide responsive service and to be able to stay connected to my constituents. It has been a very busy year, and we are 3 days after the end of the legislative session, a lot to report on. And I would say this is probably one of the most impactful years for the California legislature in a decade, because we have had to address many challenges, some of which we could not have anticipated, including devastating wildfires that ravage communities in Southern California, the impact of the Trump administration and the impact that's had on the state's budget, closing a $12 billion budget deficit. And we know that there's an even greater deficit we'll have to manage next year, particularly given the impacts of HR 1 and how that's impacting healthcare services in California. I'm sure we'll talk about that today. And then as well, addressing the issues of affordability. In the last election, I think the voters were very clear, not just in the East Bay, but throughout California, that they want leaders in Sacramento to focus on the kitchen table issues and to make sure we can make California more affordable. And that includes not just housing affordability, energy affordability, fuel affordability, healthcare affordability. And that's really been a key focus of the work the legislature's done over the past several months. I was honored to have been appointed by Pro Tem Mike McGuire to serve on the Senate's Affordability Working Group, which resulted in 3 bills, a bill that was ultimately folded into the June budget as a trailer bill to include a number of important housing policies, including addressing excessive HOA fees and rental fees, increasing resources for first-time homeownership, extending existing state laws to streamline housing production. As well, the legislature just passed on Saturday a bill that was authored by Senator Becker and Assemblymember Irwin that's focused on trying to address rate affordability for utility costs in California. Recognizing this is an ongoing challenge, particularly with PG&E having multiple rate increases approved by the CPUC over the last year, and the impact that's had on the pocketbooks of everyday Californians, and the impact that's had on making energy affordable and accessible for Californians. We also passed legislation, which I'm sure we'll talk about, Senate Bill 237, which is focused on stabilizing our refinery industry in California. This is particularly important for me as somebody who represents 2 communities that have active refineries, including in Rodeo, the Phillips 66 refinery, and the city of Richmond with the Chevron refinery, which employs thousands and thousands of workers. Many of them are union workers, skilled and trained workers, and provide significant revenue to the local tax base. And so as we're working to ensure just transition, and I'm sure we'll talk about the Green Empowerment Zone and the work that's being done in Contra Costa County on looking at strategies around just transition, we also need to make sure that we are investing in green fuels and renewable energy. And that will remain a focus of mine and a focus of my colleagues in the state legislature, including Senator Grayson, my colleague, who also represents Contra Costa County. But I come to public service as a lifelong activist and public servant. I got started in political activism at the age of 9 years old when I worked to name a street in my hometown of San Francisco after my hero Cesar Chavez. I'm the son and grandson of migrant farm workers that worked in the fields of the Central Valley. So, fighting injustice, fighting for social justice is in my DNA, and have been a lifelong political activist. I naturally gravitated to Berkeley, where I got my degree in political science, and stayed to make Berkeley my home, which I've lived in for 23 years now. I've been honored to represent Berkeley for 20 years, 4 years on the Rent Stabilization Board, 16 years on the Berkeley City Council, 8 years as the mayor of Berkeley, and now 1 year as the state senator representing Berkeley. And so I come to this legislature with a deep amount of local government experience and regional government experience. I also served when I was as mayor of Berkeley as the president of the Association of Bay Area Governments, also on a number of other regional commissions, including the San Francisco Bay Conservation Development Commission. So I believe very strongly in regionalism and looking at regional strategies to address the Bay Area and California's challenges. And transportation is, I think, one of those areas where we cannot address the region's transportation needs county by county. We have to work regionally. And so proud to have co-authored a bill, Senate Bill 63, which is on the governor's desk to allow for the Bay Area to put on the ballot next year a regional sales tax measure to provide a 14-year bridge to ensure that BART, Muni, and all transit operators, including small transit operators in Contra Costa County, have the resources to keep the buses and trains running and to avert a fiscal cliff. But it's been a very busy year in Sacramento, really, staying grounded in the priorities of my constituents: housing production, housing affordability, addressing public safety, ending homelessness, climate action. And these are things that have guided the work that I've done. We introduced over 20 bills, 11 of which are on the governor's desk, some of which we're still working through the legislative process as well. I'm happy to share a little bit about those bills as we continue our conversation. But it's absolutely critical that as one of the representatives at Contra Costa County, that I'm connected to leaders in Contra Costa County, understand the issues, and I will continue to be a fierce champion for the needs of Contra Costa County in the California State Senate. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mark and open up for our Q&A. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for catching the mute button. Good work on that. So, and you queued up so many of the issues that I hope that we'll talk about. I'll work my way through those a little bit slowly. I won't dive right into some of the bills right off the top. So, but you mentioned your time as mayor in the city of Berkeley. You led through some challenges and transformative moments in the city of Berkeley. Are there any lessons from City Hall that you've really brought with you to the state Senate that's really guiding your legislative leadership today?
Sure. Well, as a mayor, your focus is on addressing the quality of life of your constituents, making sure that you're addressing public safety, making sure that we have good infrastructure, making sure that we are supporting our business community and advancing economic vitality. And so as a mayor, even as the mayor of a city like Berkeley, a very proud, progressive, outspoken, engaged community, you have to be focused on outcomes and really delivering for the people that you represent. And so I'm proud to say I'm a pragmatic progressive. I'm a very strong progressive, but also believe very, very strongly in being pragmatic and really focused on delivering real results for my constituents. And that has really been the lens I brought to the legislature. Looking at how can we solve big challenges. Also recognizing that complex issues take time to solve and also require building coalitions. And I think as well as a mayor and as a local government official, recognizing the partnership between local government and state government is absolutely essential. And we have seen in recent years, the state passing laws, whether in the housing space or criminal justice, that have been very top down and are not really taken into consideration the input of mayors and council members and county supervisors and what are the real world impacts of the policies that we're creating. And so for me, as a former government official, I bring that lens to the work I do in Sacramento to think about, how's this going to impact the people that I represent? Is this going to create more housing? Is this going to make streets safer? Is this going to improve transportation and economic vitality? So I think I bring that pragmatic lens, the lens really focus on like what are the needs on the ground and how can we deliver real results? And honestly, this is the reason I ran for the Senate. I made the decision not to run for re-election as mayor of Berkeley because I believe very strongly that so much of what impacts communities in the East Bay is being shaped not by City Hall, but by Sacramento. And it's important that we have people in elected office who have that deep body of experience and who have that understanding about what the needs and opportunities are so that we can get stuff done. Because at the end, that's my goal, to get stuff done, to make sure we're getting stuff done for my constituents.
I mean, you alluded to this, and so I'll kind of use it as a foray, but like we're certainly an organization that thinks a lot about regional solutions as well. So that means oftentimes we've turned to state leaders to help us solve regional challenges that might be more difficult going city by city, right? And so how do you see, and you kind of talked about that balance between local control and regional problem solving, how do you see that dynamic evolving in the years ahead at this point? You've certainly kind of had a trend of statewide legislation that's tried to focus in on some of those key issues. Where do you see that leading when you talk to your legislative colleagues and folks in the community in the East Bay?
Well, I see in the housing space, a lot of what's driving the state's actions is really the lack of accountability for not permitting housing and getting homes built. And we're facing a significant housing shortage in California. By some estimates, but we need 3 million additional homes just to address the state's existing housing needs.
Yeah.
And we are woefully behind in terms of producing new homes. And so, admittedly, there's been, and I know, having been a mayor and a local government official, and having been very skeptical about
Yeah.
market rate development at one point in my elected career, that there's a lot of skepticism around these state housing laws, and whether they're actually going to move the needle on housing production, and particularly because they're taking away local control.
Yeah.
So I think we need to find a balance. We need to reward those communities that are doing the right thing, and that means we need to provide more state housing dollars and infrastructure dollars to support communities such as those that have a pro-housing designation, um, to make sure that they're catalyzing the type of sustainable infill development the state wants to see.
Yeah.
Because it can't just all be sticks. There have to be carrots too. And that's increasingly what I heard when I was president of the Bay Area's Council of Governments was the state's requiring that we have to plan for thousands and thousands of new homes, including in places that we know we shouldn't be building. And what is the state going to do to help us build that housing? Because just approving a housing element doesn't mean that housing actually gets built.
And sometimes I like to think that sometimes intention is where we have our greatest problem solving. If we're working through all the easiest areas of our policy environment, then you avoid the tension, but you don't solve the big problem. So it's natural that we're going to find some of those along the way in this process. But while I'm on the kind of housing regulatory framework that we're navigating, there were some pretty major reforms to CEQA that came through this year. We had a task force yesterday morning, took a deep dive on some of those issues. Wide range of implications, including housing. Have conversations started about what's the next big win for housing production in the state? Or are we all just is it more focused on how we need to implement these reforms in the months and years to come?
Well, I think it's several things. One, we do need to fix some of the laws that we passed that aren't really working as intended. And I'll point to Senate Bill 9, which allows for the splitting of lots to create up to 4 units in single-family properties. That was really intended to try to help create more affordable infill housing in neighborhoods throughout California. And because of certain provisions of that law, it has not effectively been used. So we have to go and take a look at some of the laws that we have and how we can tweak them, calibrate them to actually work to achieve the goal, which was to get homes built. We have to look at cost drivers and how we can make it more economically feasible to build housing in California, which has been significantly impacted by the federal government's trade policy, as well as labor shortages. And then, yeah, I mean, I think the budget trailer bill, AB 130 and Senate Bill 131 are huge changes to the California Environmental Quality Act, specifically AB 130, which I was a co-author of, to exempt most infill housing projects in the state of California. That is going to make it much more likely that we're going to see housing built in our lifetime in California. And I think it's based on the idea that the California Environmental Quality Act is a fundamental law in California that we must maintain and protect. But it has evolved over time through court decisions and through changes to the law to hinder the kind of pro-environmental policies that actually reduce VMT and greenhouse gas emissions and actually help the environment, such as putting in bike lanes and transit projects, putting in solar infrastructure, and in this case, building infill housing, which we know 60% of greenhouse gas emissions are from transportation. And if we can build housing close to where people work, along major transit corridors and around major transit stations, that will help reduce the cars on the road, reduce VMT, and help mitigate the state's climate impacts. So
reforming this law can help a lot of things, including
yes.
the environment. And I think that nothing should be out of bounds when we're talking about the biggest challenges that we face as a state. I mean, Jerry Brown famously called it the Lord's work. All over you, Senator. Thank you for helping us get that done.
Well, and I'll just say one thing, which is that there are some more tweaks that we have to make. We weren't able to sort of finalize the changes to Senate Bill 131 to address concerns around the manufacturing exemption. I believe having a manufacturing exemption advanced manufacturing exemption is important, but we know there's certain types of projects that have significant environmental impacts. And so we have to really look at that and think about how do we carefully craft that policy so we don't have unintended negative impacts on communities. As well, there were aspects of the law around protecting endangered species, native consultation, protecting habitats and wildlands that need to be addressed in that bill as well. We didn't get it done because really the clock ran out. But we're gonna work to try to address these issues, balancing broad exemptions with protecting native lands and native species.
Yeah,
because I don't think we intended to open the door to, to harm open space or harm habitat. That was never our intention.
Yeah. And we are certainly supportive of the work to make sure that advanced manufacturing can get more of those green lights. It's going to be critical to our economic vitality in the East Bay. And maybe there'll even be opportunities like, hey, let's identify some areas where these kinds of reforms could be particularly impactful. Like, so if people start to retreat at the state level, maybe there's an opportunity that we pilot that exemption in the Green Empowerment Zone in the East Bay. That's certainly something we would be very supportive of at the East Bay Leadership Council. So we can talk more about that. I'm interested in the Green Empowerment Zone and how we can leverage that for good and job growth in our region. But before I go any further, I want to circle back. You played a really important role as chair of the Senate Human Services Committee. You're in a position, and we're in a position to shape policy on everything from safety net services for vulnerable populations. I just wanted to give you a moment. Obviously, there's some follow-ups here that we could talk about in terms of SB 81, a bill that you championed this past year, the impacts of HR 1 and the uninsured population in California growing. But I just kind of wanted to give you the floor for how you envision using that role to address those challenges in our community.
Certainly. Well, I'm the only senator, probably in recent memory, that chairs 2 standing committees. As you noted, I'm proud to chair the Senate Human Services Committee, which has jurisdiction over foster care, child care, developmental services, senior programs, homelessness. Obviously, addressing homelessness and ending homelessness is a top priority of mine, and was a real focus of the work I did when I was mayor of Berkeley. We achieved a 45% reduction in unsheltered homelessness, and that's going to be a real focus of my work next year. How we deal with problematic encampments, how we get people connected to behavioral health, substance use disorder services, and interim housing, while we're working to create more permanent supportive housing. But in addition, I also chair the Senate Standing Committee on Public Safety. And I see those 2 issues as interrelated, because without a strong safety net, we're not going to have safer communities. And so I think while we absolutely need to make sure we have laws that center victims and are focused on restorative justice and creating safer communities, that we have accountability for people that commit serious crimes in California, that while we're working to reform our criminal justice system, we know that oftentimes at the core of what's impacting our communities is a lack of jobs, a lack of economic investment opportunity, the lack of a strong social service safety net. So that's absolutely critical as well. And it's going to be particularly impacted by the passage of HR 1. The deep cuts to our SNAP nutrition assistance programs in California, it's going to be hard to fix that. We did in the budget trailer that we adopted just last week, increase funding for food pantries, for programs that provide meals and food to families in California. That's not going to fill the entire gap. We know that. And it's going to disproportionately impact students. It's going to impact seniors. It's going to impact our most vulnerable Californians. And then as well, the deep cuts that we are expecting to Medicaid and our Medi-Cal program is going to be devastating. We're expecting millions of Californians are going to lose their healthcare coverage. It's going to impact hospitals who rely on that funding.
When the uninsured rates go up, it is bad news for health and outcomes, employers. It's bad. Yeah.
It's going to make our state sicker and less healthy. It's going to impact our business sector, because if people don't have access to healthcare, they're not going to be able to come to work. It's gonna impact our emergency rooms. All the while we have immigration doing enforcement at hospitals and community health clinics, which is having a chilling effect of people accessing healthcare services.
This is where SB 81 comes in, your bill as well, right?
Yeah. My top legislative priority this year was to adopt legislation to ensure that hospitals and health facilities that receive public funding, which is 90% of them in California, that we have clear policies and protocols to limit ICE from being able to come into those facilities, and making sure people are able to access healthcare without fear of arrest or deportation. So my bill, Senate Bill 81, is on the governor's desk. We're hoping the governor will sign it any day now. And that law will take effect immediately upon the governor's signature. And this is happening at a time where we're seeing immigration come into community health clinics and hospitals to question people, denying people getting access to health coverage when they're in their custody. And this is impacting the health and safety of Californians. And so I believe that nobody should be afraid to go see a doctor or go to an emergency room because of their immigration status. And that's really the core of what we're trying to protect with Senate Bill 81.
Well, thank you for your leadership on that issue. I'm going to go to a question from the audience. A reminder, if you have a question, use the Q&A feature, and I'll work it into the queue in our conversation here. We also received some questions beforehand through registration that asked this question. Where are you standing? What is your position on California's efforts to redistrict, change the lines in Prop 50? I'll give you the floor on that one.
I was proud to join the legislature to put Prop 50 on the ballot. And look, I'm a very strong supporter of independent redistricting, and supported both measures in 2008, 2010, and helped create independent redistricting in the city of Berkeley when I was mayor, because I do believe that politicians should not draw the lines. But what we're seeing is unprecedented with the President Trump's attempt to try to rig the election and to guarantee a Republican congressional majority. We've already seen the impact of that with the passage of H.R. 1 and the deep cuts in health and human services, and the escalation of immigration enforcement in the United States. And we can't afford 2 more years. There needs to be a system of checks and balances, and I really believe our democracy is at stake. So I did vote with the majority of the state Senate and state Assembly to put Prop 50 on the ballot. I'm working hard to pass that measure. I urge anyone who cares about healthcare access to reproductive health, who cares about our immigrant communities, who cares about our environment, who wants to protect California's budget, because what we saw in the first month of the Trump administration was an attempt to freeze hundreds of millions of dollars of state funding, which, thanks to legal action, we were able to reverse that freeze. Billions of dollars of grants have been in jeopardy, including transportation grants, including grants that serve Contra Costa County and Alameda County. And so there's a real economic cost to communities in California and to the state's budget if we don't act.
Thank you, Senator. I'll have another question from the audience. I'll work in before I dive into a couple more of my own. This is connected to our conversation related to health and human services. They're asking you to address childcare affordability in your capacity as both chair of that committee and chair of the affordability working group.
Yes. Well, one of the things I'm proud that we were able to protect in the state's budget this year was expanding access to affordable childcare. In the governor's original proposal, that was proposed to be cut, as well as making sure that we can provide cost of living increases for childcare providers. And so the budget that the Senate and the Assembly really fought to protect that funding, and as well as other critical human services programs. And it's essential if we want to have, a robust economy we want to grow the workforce, we have to address the childcare needs of people in our state. It is critical to economic development. It's critical to job growth and job retention. And while we were able to kind of maintain funding, we know this is something we're going to have to continue to focus on and increase our investment in the years to come.
Childcare is absolutely an investment in our regional workforce and economic vitality. Agree with you there 100%. Is there, I'm going to take I'm going to move towards, you brought it up earlier, the Green Empowerment Zone. That was a piece of legislation we were proud to support and work on when Senator Grayson carried it as a member of the Assembly. We now serve on that board of directors. How do you see initiatives like the Green Empowerment Zone fitting into a just economic transition? Or what's your vision for how we can use it? I certainly have thoughts about how we can leverage this group for economic development in the region, but I would love to get your best thinking on how we can utilize the Green Empowerment Zone for our region's benefit.
The Green Empowerment Zone is such an exciting opportunity, and happy to be part of that effort as a member of the board along with you. I think it is particularly important at a time when our refinery industry is undergoing major disruption and transition. We just heard earlier this year of the Valero refinery in Benicia closing. Phillips and Rodeo have raised concerns about their long-term viability. And so at some point, these facilities are going to close. These thousands of workers are going to lose their jobs. It's going to create huge economic disruption to Contra Costa County. And so how can we double down on the investments that are being made? The work that's being done at Phillips Rodeo on sustainable aviation fuel, the work that's being done at Chevron Richmond, looking at green hydrogen, other types of clean fuel sources, to make sure we can continue to maintain those jobs, but investing in green fuels and sustainable fuels that are good for the environment. But I think there's a lot of other opportunity as well, whether it's in advanced manufacturing, whether it's in clean tech, life sciences or biosciences, and looking at that whole corridor from Richmond all the way down to Emeryville, and the presence of major research universities here, the University of California, Berkeley, with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So this is a really, really exciting opportunity, looking at how we can, through tax incentives and land use incentives, to help attract that type of economic investment. And so, as you noted earlier, how we streamline CEQA, what kinds of tax incentives, what types of regulatory incentives we can put on the table is going to be really critical to try to attract those businesses. And I've had conversations with people in the life science industry who are very interested in looking at expanding to Richmond, expanding to Hercules. Those communities want that type of investment as well. You look at
we need to make sure that we're doing more than just marketing. Is it a great place? Like, we need to be economically, if we're going for these absolute, golden goose companies, these like very specific about an industry, then we're going to have to be competing in the Western United States with our policy to attract this folks. Obviously, we have a lot of advantages because of our workforce and our education and our location and the ports, so many things that support these companies being here. But that is certainly my mantra at the Green Empowerment Zone, that it needs to be more about not just about marketing, but also about the policy reforms that can be held in this special geography to attract the jobs we need. So,
you talk with the ports. I think that's an incredible opportunity as well, particularly with the Port of Richmond and then Port of Oakland in my district as well. I want to lift up the work of the Working Waterfront Coalition and working with maritime industry partners to provide apprenticeships and job opportunities for youth in the Richmond, West Contra Costa community. The growth of the offshore wind industry, I think, provides enormous opportunities through maintenance and through other types of services to serve those wind turbines, to help the growth of that industry. And so, really, looking at how we use our ports is not just a place where cargo goes through, but as an opportunity for advanced manufacturing, maritime jobs, looking at how we can sort of repurpose those ports to serve a variety of economic opportunities. I think it's an exciting opportunity.
Another question that's come up that's somewhat related as we kind of think about emerging industries and what role we can play to position ourselves to be economically competitive. There's a question both in the Q&A and beforehand on data centers. Any thoughts about how we could position ourselves to make sure that we can meet the demands on data needs for the East Bay's economy?
Sure. Well, unlike some people, I don't oppose locating data centers in our East Bay communities, but we know they're incredibly energy intensive. And so I think one aspect is how can we make sure that we're able to meet that demand. My colleague Senator Padilla had a bill, I believe it's on the governor's desk, which would try to ensure that the costs associated with providing that additional energy capacity are not going to be passed on to other ratepayers, because that's another concern as well. Is these things are incredibly energy intensive, and how is that also not impacting the grid and the availability of electricity for other businesses, other residential customers? And so I think we need to support the growth of that industry, but we also have to make sure we have guardrails in place to make sure that we're addressing the impacts it's creating on energy, on a variety of issues that impact the communities that these data centers are in.
Energy abundance is critical to a growing economy. I think that is clear. You can draw a pretty straight line on strong economies and energy availability very often. And there's a follow-up to our kind of green empowerment zone, oil and gas industry transition question. They're highlighting that we are still the number 3 consumer in the world of fossil fuels, number 1 consumer in jet fuel in the U.S. Are you concerned beyond the jobs component, the threat to jobs that we discussed? Are you concerned about meeting the demand, which isn't reducing nearly as fast on the supply of those fuels?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Some economic experts have estimated that with the closure of the Phillips refinery in Southern California and the closure of Valero, it will significantly impact fuel prices in California, with some numbers being thrown around of up to $8 to $10 a gallon. And certainly the lack of alternatives for aviation fuel is also a major issue as well. That's why the work that's being done at Phillips and Rodeo to really invest in sustainable aviation fuel is absolutely essential. And we weren't able to address it in Senate Bill 237 or in the budget trailer bill, but we are in conversation with them around what types of economic incentives we could provide to help them stay in Rodeo and stay in operation and expand their investment in clean fuels. But
can you expand a little bit on what we did address in 237? Because I knew that was quite an undertaking, authored by your colleague Senator Grayson.
It was a very challenging effort because it was only a year or so ago that the governor called a special session to deal with kind of the price gouging or price spiking in the fuel economy. And the legislature passed legislation, which the Energy Commission has suspended because of just the kind of the current state of the energy market in California. But the bill does several things. One, it would unlock the opportunity to do new drilling in Kern County. It's a project that Kern County has already approved. Two, it would codify certain policies around fracking and offshore oil drilling. And then lastly, it would allow for the suspension of certain rules around the
summer blend, right?
The requirements that the state has on the books for California fuel that's produced, and broaden access to a broader fuel market. And so we think those particular pieces are going to be really critical to affordability as well, and just the unlocking of the extraction in Kern County not in Alameda County or Contra Costa County, in Kern County, where they want to do this, it's going to increase the amount of fuel available for existing refineries to process. Now, look, these refineries can't stay in operation forever. We need to continue to invest in electrification, in clean fuels. We cannot go backwards in our state's commitment to transition off of fossil fuels. But the reality is that Californians are struggling. They're struggling to afford the cost of fuel. They're struggling to afford the cost of living. And people are losing their jobs. And we don't have that transition plan in place. And so we have to stabilize and make it more affordable while we're working on our bigger efforts to ensure the best transition and to make sure that we're investing in clean fuels and electrification.
I'm a yes and guy, and so is the East Bay Leadership Council. There's opportunities for us to move important initiatives forward while also stabilizing our energy and fuel supply market. That's an opportunity for us to really make a positive policy impact. So as we talk about like kind of the transportation fuel supply, that'll take me into transportation, an area that certainly you've spent a lot of time on over the last few months. SB 63, a regional measure that would allow, the enabling legislation that would allow us to place a regional measure on the ballot to support public transit. What's your vision for those investments in the East Bay? And tell us a little bit more about how you were involved in what we should be looking for in the months to come.
Well, we know that transit in the Bay Area is facing an imminent fiscal cliff, which is changing work patterns, decreased ridership, and bridge funding that the federal and state government has provided over the past several years going away in just 1 year. And so while these transit agencies have done a lot to get people back on the buses and trains, improved safety, cleanliness, and made important reductions to try to balance budgets, it's not enough. And we've seen on several times this year when BART shut down, just a few weeks ago, when BART completely shut down because of a system-wide computer failure, the chaos that puts our region in, the clogging of our freeways with cars, how it impacts people's ability to get to and from work. And so that will be an everyday reality if we do not pass this regional sales tax measure and have a long-term solution to make sure that we can make our Bay Area transit agencies fiscally solvent. And that does mean that they have to look at cost reductions. They have to look at consolidation. They have to look at efficiencies. There has to be accountability for how these tax dollars are being spent. That's a critical piece of it. So I got started in this work, one, because I'm transit dependent. I ride public transit every day, as do so many of my constituents in the East Bay. And two, I got started in this effort when I was the president of the Association of Bay Area Governments, where we worked to secure several $1 billion from the state government as one-time bridge funding through the passage of Senate Bill 125. And then more recently, over the past 3 years, working with Senator Wiener on a regional plan for transit funding. You remember there was a proposal to increase bridge tolls. That did not move forward. Then there was another bill that Senator Wiener introduced last year. Now we have Senate Bill 63, which I'm a proud co-author of, which is on the governor's desk and would allow for the Bay Area to put on the ballot a regional sales tax measure of 0.5 cent in Alameda and Contra Costa counties and a full cent in San Mateo County. This would also include San Mateo and Santa Clara County. And we estimate this will provide hundreds of millions of dollars to help fund BART, AC Transit, and also smaller operators. That's a key piece of this as well. We met with County Connection, we met with LABTA, we met with other smaller operators that serve the broader East Bay region to make sure that they are also getting some amount of funding because they're also facing budget challenges too. And these are critical lifeline transit services for many people that live in these East Bay communities. So that's one piece. In addition, we were able to secure $750 million in the state budget as a one-time loan, because if this measure goes on the ballot in 2026 and we're successful, it won't be until 2027 that we're actually going to be able to draw down on those funds to fund transit operations. And so we need to have some bridge over this next year to make sure that these agencies are going down a fiscal cliff. And so this is absolutely critical. Long term, we need to stabilize, but long term, we need to grow. We know that we need to invest in transportation infrastructure. And so Valley Link in the Tri-Valley is an exciting project, which I supported when I was on the Alameda County Transportation Commission. And I've been a strong advocate of that project with Senator McNerney and Senator Grayson. We know that we need to look at other major transit investments. In Hercules, there's the Hub project to bring a ferry terminal and Amtrak to Hercules. And in many East Bay communities, there's a critical need for transportation dollars. So we need to focus on the short term, which is to make sure that we don't fall down a cliff and that we have transit long term. But at some point, we need to have a conversation as a region about the bigger, more transformative vision for transportation in the East Bay.
No, investments in safe, reliable, and accountable transit. If you invest in those things, you're investing in a stronger economy. We believe that strongly at the East Bay Leadership Council. Thank you for your leadership in that. We believe we're on a positive path with SB 63 and the future measure in the Bay Area. So I appreciate your leadership on a number of fronts as that measure came to fruition. We have a question on education. Do you see future challenges in funding support from the legislature for public higher ed, in particular, the California State University system?
We do. It was a few weeks ago, I had dinner with the new president of the UC system, JB Milliken. We talked about the cuts in federal research grants, which have stopped critical research, including critical life-saving research and research universities throughout California. But the threat by the federal government to either withhold federal funding if UCLA doesn't provide $1 billion or other campuses don't provide funding, really the extortion the federal government is committing in holding hostage our taxpayer dollars. California is one of the biggest tax donors to the federal government. Those are our tax dollars that are being taken away, that are being threatened. And we just heard just last week that federal government asked UC Berkeley for names of faculty and students as part of their kind of witch hunt. And so this is a really concerning time for higher education in California because we've already seen the impact of cuts, which are stopping clean energy research, biomedical research. Researchers are losing their jobs because there's no certainty that those research funds are available. It's stopping critical projects. And then there's bigger threats of cuts of funding to our research universities and universities in California. And it will be hard for the state to fully backfill those cuts. That's why it was essential that we reverse the governor's proposed 8% cut to the University of California, as well as the proposed cuts to the CSU system in the June budget, because we knew that our universities were facing really, really difficult times. And the state should not be causing harm. We need to do everything we can to shore up our higher education institutions in California. So I'm very concerned. We don't know what's going to happen. And we know the state's going to have to play some role in providing some economic support if these cuts materialize. But know that we'll fight them as hard as we can. And we've been successful to date in stopping the freezing of public health dollars, the freezing of transportation dollars, the freezing of education dollars. And we will continue to fight any attempt to freeze funding that we deserve, that we're paying with our own taxes.
Yeah, well, certainly speaking of federal policies impact us locally, EBLC was one of the first, if not the first, business organizations in the Bay Area to speak out against mass deportation policies at the federal level and what that means for our regional economy or communities and what it holds all together. We firmly believe that welcoming communities are strong communities. You could stretch that in all kinds of different areas of our policy work, but California has been a national leader on immigrant protections. where should we focus next to keep that leadership strong? I know you focused on healthcare facilities and keeping them safe through SB 81. Is there anything else that you or your colleagues are thinking about in that space that we should be tracking as leaders in our community?
Well, I mean, we need to continue to push for comprehensive immigration reform. And so, and I think it should be a bipartisan issue. There is legislation by Senator Padilla to extend what's called the Federal Immigration Registry, which would amend it to allow for people that have been long-term residents of the United States, who have not committed any crimes, who are good tax-paying residents. Keep in mind, immigrants do pay taxes, significant tax amounts of $8.5 billion in taxes to the state of California,
Yeah.
to allow them a more streamlined way of them getting legal status. So that's one thing. We have to continue to push for a path to citizenship, a clear path to citizenship. But we also have to protect our immigrant neighbors from the escalation of immigration rates in our communities. And we've heard of raids in Concord at the federal courthouse, people going just to check in with immigration, and people being arrested and being detained. We've heard of immigration enforcement in Oakland and San Francisco. It's only a matter of time. And I have to say, we're not prepared as a region for this, in terms of how our businesses are prepared, making sure we have clear policies and protocols, and making sure that we have resources to help people that are facing deportation to be able to fight deportation. Because if you have a lawyer, you're going to be much more likely to fight deportation. And so while the state of California has provided tens of millions of dollars of funding, one-time funding, to help lift up legal aid services, we know that there's more that needs to be done, and we need strong partnerships between the business community, with the philanthropic sector, with government, and also just what to do, if ICE comes to a work site. There's a real lack of understanding about what to do, or to a school, or to a hospital. So this is a real serious issue, and it's going to have a devastating impact. Already is having a significant impact on the state's economy, agricultural sector, hospitality sector, construction sector, and it's really going to hurt our businesses, and it's going to harm innocent people that are doing nothing but just working hard to support their families and contributing to their communities. That's not who we are as a state, and I really want to thank you for your support of a more compassionate, humane approach to immigration in California.
And I'm hearing you clearly on the policies and employers, what role we can play. Not everything is a legislative solution. We have a role to play in this problem solving, and want to help be a part of that. We only have a few minutes left, so just a small question here. Many communities are struggling with access to affordable insurance. What's your outlook for stabilizing that market in the East Bay? Just your outlook. We don't have to get into the nitty gritty on this, but your response. Clearly, our region is one of the places that's certainly impacted by insurance challenges.
Well, I think Orinda, Moraga are some of the most at-risk communities in California. And as somebody who represents the East Bay Hills, I remember the 1991 Berkeley Hills firestorm that destroyed thousands of homes and took the lives of 25 people. We have seen even more catastrophic wildfires in California since then. So a lot of work is being done to focus on vegetation management, home hardening, through Prop 4, through state budget investments. We're increasing resources for projects to make communities more fire safe. And I'm working to fight to increase actual budget investments in the East Bay Hills to make sure we can keep those communities safe. But that's had an impact on the insurance market. And so there's work underway in the Department of Insurance, the Sustainable Insurance Plan, to look at risk modeling, to look at how we can create a much more streamlined way to process rate increases. And some of that is happening now. And so it's going to take a while for those reforms to take full effect. But we are seeing some major insurers coming back to California and being willing to underwrite policies. And we have to kind of tie that to how we are providing support and incentives for people to make their homes and their properties more fire safe in exchange for getting a commitment to underwrite insurance policies and reduce rates.
Those investments in home
you
hardening
should
and
be
safety make a
rewarded. You
huge
shouldn't be
difference.
penalized.
Yeah.
And all the while, more people are on the FAIR plan, and the FAIR plan is becoming unsustainable long term. So there are pieces in place, but it's going to take us time to really stabilize the market. And while reforming the process is one piece, it's also how do we address the risk, and how do we make our community safer? And that's a really critical part of it as well.
Definitely two sides of the coin on that one. All right, so I've got one more sort of substantive before I do a very quick lightning round with you. But if you could change one policy in California with the wave of a magic wand, snap your fingers, however you'd like to think of it, what would it be?
That's a great question.
It gets the same response every time. All your colleagues, we bring it. I'm surprised it hasn't started circulating the magic wand question. Is there anything or something that maybe another way of thinking about it at the end of your term? Is there something you really would like to be known for? A policy that if politics was out of the picture and you could solve tomorrow, what would that be?
Well, I believe very strongly that we have a moral obligation to address and end homelessness in California. And I think if I could wave a magic wand, I would try to find some way to get people stably housed and connected to the compassionate services and housing resources that they need to end homelessness.
Well, let's take the magic out of it. I'm excited to, and I want to say that, I mean, your career shows it. Like, you've worked on housing in so many different ways. Grateful for that. Anything else you were trying to add before I interjected there?
And I would also say that, California has some of the strongest gun control laws in the nation, but we still see so many communities that have been impacted by devastating gun violence, including in my district in Oakland and Richmond. And so we have to do I mean, every week, every month, we hear of some mass shooting. And even in California, where we have very strong gun safety laws, background check laws, assault weapon laws, this still is a challenge that is inflicting so much harm in communities and making communities less safe. And so we have to find some way to really move the needle on that issue as well, addressing gun violence comprehensively.
Agreed. All right. Quick lightning round, all fun from here on out, all easy. Then you're on your way. I know we're at 1 o'clock. One word answers only, Senator. One word answers only. Bagels or donuts?
Bagels.
Bagels, correct. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
All right, you're on a roll. Early bird or night owl?
Neither.
Neither. I like it. Balanced. Podcast or music?
Oh, music for sure.
Music. All right. Accessory dwelling unit or duplex?
Duplex.
Duplex. All right. And then where do you like to do the people's business? Sacramento or in the district? There's a right answer, I think.
In the district for sure.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be back and look forward to seeing many of you in the district over the next few months.
Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you for taking the questions. I hope we got to most of the audience questions today. We value your engagement with the East Bay Leadership Council's worth, whether you've got Senator in front of your name or you're a member of the organization. For your colleagues that were unable to join us, the recording will be posted to our YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe. And if your organization is not yet a member of the East Bay Leadership Council, let's change that. You know who to contact. Find me and let's get you involved. I'd be happy to meet with you, tell you more about what we're working on and how we can work together to achieve a shared vision of economic vitality and quality of life in the region. So learn more, eastbayleadershipcouncil.com. With that, we are adjourned. Have a great day. Thank you, Senator.